Please do make sure to join the call doc and sign in. I see lots of activity there from anonymous animals and other people. Should we start off with the cart slide?
I think that would be great.
Fantastic. I'll bring it up. Second here. Thanks everyone for joining us on our 22nd call. It's great to see how this community's really come together and built out. Okay, sorry, it's just taking me a second to get to the place and do the authentication and all that good stuff.
Yeah, Kirk said 22 and 22.
There we go.
Surely this year is going to be better than the last couple. I'll leave Shirley out of it. Thanks.
All right, so I guess we give Google a second to load up the slide. But as I think folks well know, CARC is the Campus Research Computing Consortium, pushing forward the frontiers of research by improving the effectiveness of professionals in RCD positions, helping them with their career development and visibility and their ability to deliver services and resources for researchers. The CARC is made up of the People Network, a set of working and interest groups, and the operations group. This call is the emerging centers track within the People Network. We also have the researcher-facing track, systems-facing track, data-facing track. And then within the working groups, there are a number of folks working to advance sort of our understanding and scholarship about our industry sector and the people who work within it. Where'd the rest of the slide go? Oh, it's just, thanks, Google. Thank you.
Google knows better than you do where you want to
really,
go.
really does, doesn't it? Somewhere, okay, there we go. So the People Network is a year-round remote conference, and we post our calls on the CARC YouTube channel. You can see pretty much all of the calls within that YouTube channel as we record them and post them. This conversation is going to be recorded and posted, and you can see a little bit more about each of the individual working and interest groups. And there's a link to this slide in our meeting notes as well. And I will stop the share so that we can see each other. A couple of items before we kick off. We are moving the Google Drive into a shared drive for CARC. Jane and I will be working on that this month. So some things hopefully will be completely smooth and without any kind of service interruption. We'll do our best to make sure that that's fully maintained, and you can find stuff. If you go looking for stuff and can't find it, let us know and we'll try and dig it up out of the various and sundry things. The move to a shared drive just helps us have continuity in case somebody leaves the organization or leaves their home organization, and then the Google Drive components go to the great beyond, and we can't really have that. I'd also like to report that we had our sort of first call to get the Emerging Centers Steering Committee and to introduce those folks as well, the ones we have with us. Jason Wells and Alex Feltis. Preston Smith is also, I don't know if he's on the call today, but he doesn't have his video going, so I don't see him. Have volunteered, and Kirk, did I hear you volunteering as well? Okay, so we'll be setting up monthly meetings. The steering committee is there to help us direct the course of emerging centers, what we're going to be talking about, and the way that we work with the membership, the kind of goals and vision of this track. So if you want to contribute to that, I would encourage you to join up with the steering committee. We had a very lively conversation yesterday, and I imagine that there will be many lively ones to come. So if you have any questions about doing that, feel free to let us know, and we'll rope you in, and you'll never be able to extricate yourself.
Oh, no, that was just, that was in parentheses. You weren't supposed to read that part, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's absolutely voluntary, and you will have great benefits conferred upon you.
You will, actually.
I think the last thing is just if there are topics that people want to discuss, you don't have to be in the steering committee to let us know about those. You can email us at the link within the document is EC coordinators, and that'll get to Jane and I, and we'll probably put together an address for the steering committee as well. So if you have ideas about what you want to hear about on these calls, or something that you would like to facilitate, which we would very much welcome, let us know what your own personal hobby horse is, so that you can talk to us about it on a Wednesday afternoon. As long as it's salient to the emerging centers track, which is a pretty broad set of stuff. So we welcome all manner of conversations. And with that, I think that's all the logistics. I don't think we have anything else unless anybody wants to bring it up once.
The only other thing we do have in the call document also, and thank you everybody for signing in. I think we have kind of a schedule of, yeah, we do. So down at the bottom of, if you scroll down, we do have what are planned for our next, I think, 6 months, if not for, yeah, about 6 months. The calls that we have planned, and this is based on our session last summer or late spring, where we went through and kind of prioritized some things that we thought and voted what we thought the community might like to see. So you can see there what we're kind of planning on. That doesn't mean that those are set in stone in any sort of way, but you know, you can see the number of votes that they got. The one we're talking about today was the highest vote, so we decided to do it first. But so if you have any interest in those, you know, and again, being a facilitator or coordinator is not a heavy lift at all. It's just maybe contacting a couple of people, having them help, you know, or do a panel or whatever kind of format you'd like. What we'd like to do is meet with you and the steering committee the month before and kind of go over different ideas. But a lot of the logistics, the great thing about CARC is they have a lot of these logistic stuff already set up and available, and it just is pretty easy to do everything within this community. So that was all I wanted to say about that. So Rich, did you want to get started, or Kirk, do you want to help us with this one here, kind of what we had talked about doing, because there's so many policies. I'm just going to keep going unless somebody tells me to stop. But so there's lots of policies, and you know, I think we're all, you know, we keep talking about kind of what is an emerging center. Well, we find that basically every level of center or individual that supports or provides these kind of resources is kind of who we are in this community. So there's different levels of policies that people have, and some have gone, you know, pretty far, have been in place for a long time, which then can help those of us that are just starting. You know, the goal is to have, again, like we talked about with marketing kind of documents, you know, we don't want everybody recreating the wheel, and we understand the challenges of having, you know, keeping up to date on documents in repositories, and we're still kind of kicking around where we want to put these things. But, you know, we thought maybe if we could put links, but that's the goal of talking about these things, kind of talking about each policy, kind of when should you have a policy in place? Like, is there one that everybody has, you should have no matter what when you start off? And then you can build, you know, as you go along. So what is the priority of policies? What makes a good policy? So we kind of thought we would just talk about the overall picture today, because, we only have an hour and it's 12:14. So we listed, these were the topics or the ideas that came up in our discussions about this particular call last year when we talked about it. And Mike, I don't know if you're on here, but yeah, your name was just still on there from last year. But so
I am panicking on an MRI deadline, but I am here and I have stuff.
Oh, good for you for doing an MRI.
And I think another thing is for us to co-write policies so that we sort of expand it and make it relevant across different centers, so that it's like, well, I had it in this one, because I think sometimes when we look at it in a more global scale, if we round out the policies to accommodate more situations, I think that also will help as we grow from small to big. I think that's another thing of co-writing policies, because I think some of us come in from different areas and disciplines and skill sets, to think of it from a legal or political or a resource-oriented kind of thing, that could be helpful for us to bat around of like, well, this is a big policy where we could never do it with a one-person show, or it's necessary because it's needed.
Absolutely. So while we're talking, I did put in the call document again, which it looks like most of you have been able to get to. I just kind of have a couple of sections. The first one is, what policies are you currently using? Please provide links to any policies that you currently have. So I didn't put a link to our data use agreement, but I put in a link to our policy page, which really doesn't have anything on it yet. I also then listed Georgia Tech's policy page, which has a lot, which is kind of where we've been starting in my team, looking at them, seeing what we need. Looks like Bob's put some stuff in there. So list anything that you're using. And if you can give us, I think having links to those are the best way to keep pointers that people are keeping up to date, so we're not just putting documents in. The next category is list any policies you plan to create in the future. And I just said, if it's already listed, put a +1. So this way we can kind of see, what do people think is important to maybe develop, and where in your timeline of developing your services. And, it may always just be one person that's offering the services, but there are some policies that, like I think the data use agreement is something that everybody should do right away. So somehow we'll kind of come back and try to find out, which of the policies do we want to focus on as we do some co-creating or some co-editing that Kirk talked about.
And can I ask what you mean about your data use agreement policy? I'm assuming you're talking about policy of that. Is that in terms of people furnishing data use agreements, or I'd love for you to expand on that.
Oh, that's a very good point. This is our university data use agreement that came out of our Office of Information Security that we, when you get an account, when you log in, you have to click and say, yes, I agree to the University of Cincinnati data use agreement that I won't use. It's basically like I won't use any of our services for to do anything illegal. So it wasn't a policy that we created. I'll find a link and put it to that. But
so it's almost like an information security policy on best practices around.
It is.
Okay. All right. Great. That's nice to know.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we thought we would document here, but I think, we could go through each of these since Mike has a little bit prepared. Just kind of the other thing I thought, and I want to get people's input back on this, and this just kind of came to my mind right before this. We were thinking about kind of doing a what do you call it, Rich? Like, you know, I say what my policies are that I have and kind of explain them. And then I pick Jason to talk about his policies that he has. And then Jason can pick somebody else, trying to get a little bit of discussion, you know, more people talking than just me and Rich. And I mean, we do have more. Kirk is helping us on this one too, so that's good. But something like that. Then the other thing I thought about was we could pick these policies that we want to talk about, and then like maybe each call have kind of a policy presentation, and each a person or people take a policy and then they kind of present on it at the beginning of one of the calls, or every call we have this. It's just like a 5-minute or a 10-minute policy presentation. And they will come and bring their policy or examples of the same policy and kind of maybe give us a, you know, they can either work on it and come up with the best practice one, but kind of pick maybe 1 or 2 policies per call to just have like a little call out. So we're not, you know, this could take us like 3 calls just talking about these policies. So I don't know if anybody has any inputs. We could do a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or we can talk about it at the end of this. I can't see everybody, so.
I can run off at the mouth for a while if we're looking to use some time. I've got slides from a couple years ago for some policies that we were thinking about doing. We haven't done them all, but at least it's a framework that people can possibly fit some stuff into, and I can adjust the slides to be more generic for everybody if that's something that we want to put into a drive or something later.
Sarvani has a really cool question in chat.
And maybe I can kind of get to that. Let me see if this is going to behave right. Host is disabled participant screen sharing. Host Rich. Thank you.
I have promoted you.
Find all the right buttons. Zoom calls are kind of like seances. Spirits, are you with us? Okay, so hopefully that's a big honking PDF slideshow view now, right?
Yes, we see.
Okay, so this is from a couple years ago when I was trying to get some queuing and sustainability models together for here. We haven't all got all that straight yet by any means, but like I said, trying to come up with a framework for how we could deal with stuff. If you are the SLRM person at your emerging center, you probably know some, if not all of these terms from when you had to set up SLRM. So we've got users that are individual people, accounts that are they're PI groups, they're classes, they're whatever. They're kind of like a billing unit. Your queues are partitions. You got possibly 1 or more clusters, an association, trackable resources, and quality of service. And so where we thought we were going, and where I think probably anybody's going to go in the long run, is you might have people that are doing condo model. I'm calling those members in this. You might have people who have small account budgets that can't afford, you know, a useful amount of resource. They can afford resources. They don't want to buy a share of a computer because maybe they have very bursty needs. We got one physics guy runs jobs twice a year. He could take up the entire cluster for a short period, but he doesn't need 5 cores for an entire year. He needs hundreds of cores for a short period of time. And so he might be what we call a pay-as-you-go person. And then you got all the people that are doing speculative research, it's academic use or whatever. Somebody that, you know, we're going to call that the gratis group, the people that, you know, they're there for free, and we're gonna try and serve them as best we can. And you might have people that are in several of those groups. So the goals that we had at the time, and the technical policy implementation is going to be driven by this. Let's say we want to be the place where we don't care who you are, you get to run stuff, you get to do experiments, we don't care if you got money or not. Doesn't mean we treat everybody equally, but we at least don't deny anybody. If you're a free subscriber, basically, you might be limited in the total amount of resources you can use. You might be limited in your priority, but you can still run stuff. And Slurm has some really good stuff in fair share, which we use heavily from day one in this installation, where we can basically determine or set a level of percentage share that each research group, in our case, gets of the HPC. We treat them all equally currently. As it works out, the way the fair share works is if you are over your fair share, you tend to get deprioritized if there's other people waiting to run jobs. If you are under your fair share, whatever that amount is, and your jobs will get pushed to the front of the queue, and it sort of evens itself out. The nice thing with this is, to be all fancy statistics person, or math person, the lower bound of the resource share over a long period of time is going to be analogous to your fair share. That's if everybody just absolutely runs flat out as hard as they can. But realistically, some people, most people maybe, are not going to be running all the jobs that they could. So you're probably going to get more than your fair share. I've got groups, all my groups are basically about 10% fair share. My heaviest one is probably 60% over about a 4.5 year period. And so, we try and you can try and make, compromises for people that your members and your pay-as-you-go people that are actually contributing get fewer limits on their times, fewer limits on their resources, higher priority. But again, you can kind of set these on your own. This was a policy we came up with at the time. We have not implemented it in terms of actually setting these lengths, but it's sort of along the line. We've got all the structure for it. And so you can say, for example, if you're free, you get to use it, but you're going to be limited in time. If you're a contributor, you get access to more time. If you're a free rider, if you're in the gratis share, you get a small fair share so that the people that are contributing can get what they paid for. And so, you can set limits if you have a condo model or a contribution model of what your minimum contribution can be, what your cost per CPU hour is going to be per GPU hour, figure out how much of a node they're going to take by how much RAM they took, how many cores they took, whatever, and work out what you think those financial costs should be, if anything. So what we did in Slurm, and stop me if this gets too in the weeds, please, is I set up basically a little proof of concept to demonstrate that we could do all this. We never got SCED-MD support, but we had, an abundance of free time on my plate and a poor work-life balance. So worked out all of this stuff. And so, we've got some tools for letting people submit jobs. HPC shell is a wrapper around SRun. By default, it goes into a really high priority, time-limited interactive partition. But we would have the ability with this to say, okay, if you just run HPC shell by default, you go into the gratis set, just so everybody has sort of a sensible least common denominator default. But if you need to get access to extra resources as a subscribing member or a funder, whatever it is, you can change your account on that command and be treated under that group instead of the gratis group. Same thing for the pay-as-you-go, except that we also had to add a quality of service in Slurm to make all of that work. But still, we could set these as the default for people, but we do run the risk, sort of like the cloud computing model of you might end up burning up a lot of your billable resources on things that didn't need to be that way. So if you let people set it explicitly every run, there are hopefully fewer surprises, if not less irritation. Same thing in their batch scripts, just with SBatch lines. And so from the admin side of things, if I'm going to set up an association with a fair share on a particular cluster. And so we hopefully are going to split things up to where we've got basically a cluster that is all student funded that we bought in 2016. And we're going to have a cluster, or hopefully two, if the MRI comes through, with that is all research funded. And so maybe then we get to say, oh, classes, you may not get the latest and greatest, but you got this stuff you guys already paid for, good enough for most of what you need. And we'll talk about the bigger stuff if it doesn't meet things. And so we can set up an account in that cluster for that particular group, whatever it is, and we can assign them a fair share value. Add people and remove people from it, no big deal there. You just add users to an account. And you can even do this on a specific partition in some cases. Need to modify their fair share because they contributed more money, less money, something expired, you can modify their fair share with this account manager. Pay-as-you-goes were a little bit more fiddly to get running because our fair share setup just basically prioritizes and deprioritizes, and it's could be unlimited amounts of resources people could queue up. Pay as you go, we want that to be hard limited. And so we made an account for all of the pay as you go projects that gets probably a high fair share if we were doing this. And then underneath that account, we can make a specific account for a particular project. We can make a QoS for that particular project where its resource usage is not subject to that sort of half-life decay that SLRM uses for fair share calculation. And we can also say if they've run out their limit, deny any further jobs that are not going to complete within that limit of time. And then, so with those three or four S account manager lines, one to get started, 3 for each project, we can make a project and a quality of service for the people that are on sort of these time limited, high usage, but short period projects. We can change the fair share for the overall pay as you go. We can see how much usage people have had, or they can even look that up on themselves, I think. We can add people and remove them from those particular quality of services. Thank God this is recorded because I know I'm going fast. And then for the gratis account, it's just basically another account with a different fair share that we can add people to by default. And then we've got a few other things in our SLRM config. We do not do exclusive user. Our nodes are very often shared. This one, yeah, all partitions by default, allow all groups to submit to that partition by default. And I guess the interesting thing, so for particular partitions, accounts are all. We use priority tiers on our interactive queues that are time limited so that those interactive jobs very quickly go to the front of the line, and it practically zero weight on an interactive job on our setup for a few reasons. And then I guess the last thing is after the, so for your long partitions that you don't necessarily want the gratis people to have access to, all that should take is adding the gratis account and then all the people under that account to the deny accounts list on that partition, and then they can't submit to those bigger ones unless they explicitly specify a non-gratis account that has access to it. I don't think there's anything else in there. We also have some things in there for limiting GPU consumption for a person to where they can't take up more than 8 GPUs at once. And that's all I've got. I can roll back to something if somebody cares, and I can stop talking now. Sarvani, did that get you? I can't see chat now. There's a lot of chat messages.
Yeah, there's a lot of good discussion about
I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see things again.
Yeah, education and how that's being handled at different places. You know, open on demand. You know, having central or separate clusters like you talked about. You know, I would love to see, and we've looked at trying to get funding from our, I can't remember what they call it, but students pay like a tech fee.
Student course, well, yeah, we have a technology access fee that everybody pays that goes primarily to my group. I don't see any of, well, I say my group, my giant enterprise IT group.
Oh, right.
That actually did pay for my first cluster.
Yes.
I do not agree with that, but wasn't my call. I wasn't in the group at the time.
Yeah, my favorite comment in here is Alex saying if the students had to pay for education, he would find another job, which I think is, you know, it's great to have. And oh shoot, sorry, I'm trying to chat this, but yeah, there's lots of different ways that people are handling this. Education is a big deal, but thank you so much for that SLRM stuff. I know Kurt Roberts, my system admin, is on here, and
yes, Kirk, I may edit a couple things out, especially this is from 2 years ago.
But man, that's so much good information in like, 15 minutes. Very, very useful.
I think there was a little bit of discussion too about policies for use versus policies or SLAs, which are more on the system side, like, with your service providers that you have. And that's could be a whole other conversation. I know even like talking about having service level agreements for maintenance after our, you know, those kind of things. Like, what are people doing there? I don't really want to talk about that now, but that's
Yeah,
something.
one other thing for student usage I just remembered is I had a Campus Champions project with Rick's group a couple years ago about basically converting idle Windows computer labs to be open HPC diskless nodes. So if you've got a resource limit and you want people to have, you know, a full non-virtualized HPC environment for no extra equipment costs, let me know. We've got it on a GitHub somewhere. So burst capacity, whatever you want to call it. We are not doing that right now. I don't have any labs that we can take over that way. Hopefully soon.
Can I make a bit of a radical statement?
Please.
So when I go into my classroom, I don't, they don't make me pay for the turn on the lights. And I think that they shouldn't make me pay for using our campus cluster, and they don't. It's democratized at Clemson. We're really lucky to have that, but there's always, you know, dents in the armor with that one. But I argue that this is a fundamental learning task for everybody for doing this kind of, especially in STEM, and it goes out to other disciplines. And so it seems like the conversation should be had the chancellor, provost, president level for making the stuff free, as opposed to trying to put the cost back on the faculty. Because I'm serious. I would if I can't teach at Clemson, I leave Clemson. If I can't do research at Clemson, I leave. I go somewhere else where I can do what I want to do. So you start to like erode, stop recruiting people. I wouldn't serve on search committees if I couldn't tell people that they could do their mission as a faculty member at my university.
Yeah, for Paul, storage is the 800-pound unpleasant gorilla for us. I've got some. I never really had a clear picture of how to set policies that would let people do data intensive research, because to be honest, aside from OneDrive and SharePoint, my institution doesn't currently have any large scale storage that's not directly attached to my HPC. So I'm storing a bunch of stuff that people never run a job with. They just need a few terabytes of storage, and I don't like being in that business. Hopefully my MRI will fix that.
Yeah, that's a separate service entirely, right? And so Alex, I think you have a good point that, yeah, there should be some universal access. I think the range of what people need is so broad that there does have to be some kind of mechanism for identifying that, so that when there are people who are like, yeah, I make 5 terabytes of data a day, you're able to say, okay, well, we need a different way of dealing with that. Or the people who are like, yeah, I run, I need 400,000 cores at a time, and I'm not willing to go to exceed for some reason, or they don't work well with others. There need to be ways to manage that and work with that. But there are schemes for that, and I think this group is well set up to exchange and talk about those things. Certainly at our institution, I'm trying to figure out how we can provide that base level of access to let people get started who are just starting out, just getting into computational research, and then they can go new and different places with it.
Yeah, one of the variants that we're facing is backups. Is we're using a Ceph cluster, and yes, we have 4 copies of your files, but if you delete those, yes, we have snapshots, but only to a minimum, to a certain level, and we have 2.5 petabytes of black hole data that we could not back up. It was, computed on Blue Waters and very valuable data, but I can't necessarily give you 100%, if the building burns down, I can't take care of it. And so one of the things that we're looking at is, putting it into our policies that Well, as a researcher, you are responsible for your data. We are a repository, and we give you a certain level of security and assurance. But when it's all said and done, we need those memos of understanding, or, you know, the get out of jail free cards of, yeah, you dumped 2 petabytes of data. And if it goes down, we do our best, but can't guarantee.
I don't think I'm sharing any secrets that here, this is that the storage and the sustainability is not a problem that is exclusive to HPC or research computing.
Mhm.
General university file storage is limited because we haven't figured out how to do that sustainably. Virtual desktop infrastructure, kind of the same way. Security cameras has nothing to do with anybody in here. People in my group deal with security cameras. The amount of kicking and screaming we got when we just went to it costs to maintain the back-end servers for your video storage and the encoding and all the other stuff for your retention. But we bought a camera.
Yeah, and are you looking at it? Well, and then there was the article, I don't know if everybody caught, where somebody lost 77 terabytes of data, where my storage guy says, oh, how cute. we have that in an error file kind of thing. But that one was the one that sort of tripped us of, okay, I need to actually publicize, I've got your data and I'm doing my best to keep it there, but
Storage policies, yeah, we need to write that on the list. That I think storage is a whole call that we probably should we could have a plenary with the other groups.
data inclusive,
Yeah, because it is, and we just got a pilot funded by our Office of Research to get 1.2 petabytes for research project storage, because we're like you, Mike, all we have is Scratch, and it's like, or we have Enterprise, which was quoted one of our researchers $60,000 a year to store there. So that's a big bit, right? You have to be very clear up front. And what I think is happening, at least like with us, it's like, well, we finally got a system admin to actually run our cluster. Now we're getting very complicated storage. And, he's on this call, and he's like, it's a full-time job to be setting up and architecting clusters, and we need a storage admin. So that, when I say that to our VPR, and he's like, well, now you need somebody. And I'm like, yes, that has to come with it because of these policies and these, making sure.
Remove your first awful bottleneck.
Yeah, that's right.
What's your next one?
Yeah, right.
Well, and it's leveraging things like the open storage network that's out there, and maybe making memos of understanding to share data across collaborators, where we'll duplicate your data set if you duplicate ours, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think those are things that are coming through of, and then God forbid we talk about sensitive data of health data or CUI data, where it becomes even more fun.
Mm-hmm. Which we all have to be talking about it because it's existing everywhere. One thing I wanted to say too, I hate talking about money, but people is why we would have to consider charging most of the time for anything like educational resources. And what we're doing is what we did, and my VPR helped me do this. I proposed a job description to our provost for a research facilitator that's just going to focus on the educational use cases. And they're not just going to help make sure the classes are set up and make sure there's time scheduled for those classes, but they will also be helping the faculty members define their curriculum, which is something that's really needed also, because, they may be teaching something that's 5 years ago to keep them up to date. So that's, it's one position, but I think the provost is going to fund that, just dedicated for that. So
debugging labs and updating materials, we've faced that, and we are only dealing with like 2 or 3 classes right now, to the infinite set that could come on. To your point, I think that's another thing, but that's also one where I'm wondering if it is a collaborative thing of like the HPC Carpentry or working within CARC to help develop good Slurm materials and genomics materials and things like that, to leverage people who are much faster at some of that and sharing some of the load of developing that curricular material.
Absolutely. Because there's never going to be enough of us to do it all at our own places. And now I'm wondering if the RCD model has storage admins in it.
I think so. It's one of the variants in the system side, if I
Okay.
remember right.
I mean, that would make
Because
sense.
luckily I do have a storage admin,
Yeah.
and oh my God, it's so nice to have, because he can wield that Ceph cluster like nobody's business, but
Yeah.
he's got 20 years in basically just doing storage.
Yeah.
And so that is so valuable. And that's one where replicating those data sets, or doing regional storage nodes, because that's one where, like within state systems or smaller colleges, being able to leverage a storage consortia or something like Open Storage Network could be something to
That's where we
roll
need
out.
faculty and researchers to they're the ones that would know what that data is and moving there.
And I was looking for the CC star of actually reaching out. The Open Storage Network folks will actually place a rack of
Mhm.
like 1.5 or 1.9 petabytes, and they manage it, which is the other key piece, because it's sort of a commoditized resource. And I'm wondering if those things of just being geographically diverse, network diverse, that would be something that I've been sort of pondering of, using like Open Science Grid and the National Research Platform and the Open Storage Network to help leverage some of those facilities to, especially when you don't have, like, I'm looking at them as on-ramps, and also being sort of that stone soup of contributing to the greater good.
Yeah, is the CC star, is there one March 1st again this year? Because I just looked at the program and I didn't see that they actually have the due date.
Yeah, they just had it close in October, but I don't see that. I haven't seen anything announced yet.
What did somebody say in the background there? Anybody know anything about the CC star? Because I was thinking about the Open Science Network too. I mean, not Open Storage Network. I think that's a great model for a great thing that.
Yeah, they don't have anything past 2021, as I think Kirk said, which I hope we didn't bleed the program dry last year.
I don't think so,
But March 1st deadline with no changes is odd.
Well, I think it may be time to send an email to Kevin Thompson. Just poking and saying, hey, is there anything going on?
Because if to submit one in March.
Yeah, gotta start now.
Start now.
Yeah, especially if you want to get your letters of support and collaborations going.
Mm-hmm. Savani said that Campus Champions are going to have the Open Storage Network on the Campus Champion call on February 15th. Paul asks if you can share your storage admin position description. Kirk, you have one.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'll see if I can dig that out.
Alex. Campus No campus. No campus clusters. Did you have something you wanted to talk? We're trying to get, I'm trying to get rid of all the little small campus clusters. So your destruction of campus clusters is or the addition of.
Sorry, the amalgamation of. The
Well, I was
board.
just, I'm sorry.
Good.
I was just curious if anybody here doesn't know what Exceed is or doesn't have campus cluster that needs access to national resources and they're never going to build a significant machine because they'll never have the money for it. I mean, are there any small colleges here, community colleges, anything like that? Just out of curiosity. Because there's a lot of people that don't know what rack means
Yeah.
for
And
Exceed.
also
means.
putting in a plug for the Open Science Grid. The folks that support that are brilliant, and especially if you're in a real small group or small college, they will help researchers do the facilitation. And the nice thing about that is you can sort of piggyback on that facilitation to learn how to use it and add it as a resource.
So Alex, I think your question kind of goes back to the we're called emerging centers, this group. And so maybe people think, well, I don't have a center. I'm not creating a center. I'm a person that needs to use these tools, but I don't have access to them. So they may not be part of this community. Not that they shouldn't be. And, I think that's something we need to keep working on. There were a few people that said.
So this is Patrick. We've been talking to a lot of folks like this, and part of what we see is that what comes before an emerging center is often a faculty member's got a cluster, or there's a small departmental cluster, and they generally operate that fairly inward looking, and it wouldn't occur to them to go looking for a large community like this where they could actually get support. That's part of the evolution of thought that works them towards even thinking about being an emerging center. I do think outreach to those folks is really important. I think Alex's point about connecting it to when they need more than that, when they do need national resources, are they using that departmental cluster or the private cluster, not just for all their compute, but as an on-ramp to doing national computing where they can establish, yeah, I'm ready for Exceed and things like that. I think there are real opportunities for outreach there. The other thing that I think is worth considering there is how many people are looking at cloud instead of HPC because of those reasons. They don't have access to a data center or the kind of resources to build that up. And I think we might think about how we bridge those two worlds a little better.
Yeah, especially the NIH Strides program. If you have anybody doing NIH grants, there is the Strides program where you can apply for allocations.
And I think if I'm think back about like what we did at UC, we had lots of different campus clusters, or not campus, but individuals. But then we kind of created our little, we called them like a little concierge research computing group. We didn't have a cluster, but we were the people that we worked with Ohio Supercomputer Center, and we got connected with the Exceed people. And then when anybody looked for something, they had a central place to come to. So it wasn't necessarily that we had to have the cluster, but when IT didn't have anybody that could help them, that was, I think, the people, again, you can find computing resources at places, but if you don't have anybody that in your IT department or in your office of research or in some sort of central location that is available, nobody knows where to go. I mean, they might try to ask, the person next to them. But so we started offering the training and the workshop for the Ohio Supercomputer Center and for OSG and for Exceed. And that's how we kind of got started. So, I always think it's about the people. I mean, if that researcher in that small college doesn't, they go to IT and IT is like, I don't know anything about Exceed. So that's kind of, that was how we got started. And then it was like, well, now we need, a central cluster for all those people that don't want to pay for cloud and don't, that's really, maybe we don't think about it as central cluster, but we think about as universal resource people. And I know some people are commenting on chat, because it's really a big, you know.
I think that's absolutely right, Jane. And that's what a lot of people in the chat are also echoing, that it is about helping people to get access. And even if you have a big cluster, that doesn't mean anybody outside of some of the traditional users know how to use it. But I think what we've also seen is the challenge is, okay, how do you bootstrap a program like that? Where are the resources going to come from to fund somebody to do that? And I think that can also be a huge challenge at these smaller institutions. It's often easier to get one-time funds for a cluster than it is recurring funds for support people.
Definitely. So how can I think that's where, how can CARC help find those people and help those people? Now we've got this community, and how do we get them into our network? Because yeah, I mean, nobody would hire anybody at UC until we got an MRI, until we got equipment. And it was like, well, we never really needed the equipment, but I needed to have the equipment to hire the people. So, how can we be those? I don't know. Anyway, that's something. Alex, I see your hand raised.
There's a whole army of people out there, the faculty, that then there's some of them onboard people. I have some of my colleagues. I mean, I've onboarded, I don't know, 400 or 500 people since I've been at Clemson onto our system. And so I try to avoid IT as much as possible, so I don't bother them. And I do basic stuff like teaching people how to use the command line and access the compute system. And I do workshops where I teach people how to access the NRP. And I haven't done open science grid, but we've used a lot of that in my research. But the faculty can train people and onboard people too. And so and I'm already funded. I get paid a pretty good wage to teach students how to do stuff. And so I do that's, I don't have to get any grants or anything to teach my classes. We have a democratized system that I use. But actually I use VMs and other systems too to teach stuff. So it's not, the burden's not always on the IT department. The burden's also on the faculty. And I think that we need to be closing that gap and overlapping as much as possible with dealing with problems like IT departments developing curriculum is a very bad idea, because IT have to be, they can't be siloed. They have to serve everybody, right? You start doing that, and then it becomes a problem. But the faculty can do this training too. And I know a lot of people that do it. That means there's a lot more than just the people I know.
It can, but you're a generous soul, Alex. And we haven't always had that same attitude among all the faculty that we try to get involved. Grad students sometimes, and that was one thing that figuring out ways to get the grad students in the traditional areas who come up through grad school, learning how to use the resources to help out beyond that, is a really cost-effective way of providing support, but it still takes work to coordinate them.
Okay.
No, I mean, I think it's great what you're saying, Alex, and I think it's awesome. I wish all faculty had that attitude. And one of the things that's really a struggle is beyond, getting into the non-traditional domains and bootstrapping a social scientist or humanist into the systems where they actually need a little bit more hand-holding, maybe to help creating a Jupyter notebook to front the compute with what they're trying to do, because, they didn't come up through grad school using anything like this.
Right. How do you find that faculty member that, like our champion kind of at UC is aerospace engineer, but, he's probably not going to work with our social sciences people. He's helped a lot of engineers.
Yeah, and I think, going back to your earlier comment, Jane, I think you're right that the community is really the enabler here in figuring out how to connect people and convince them more broadly that if they don't have an Alex on their campus who's willing to do that for them, that there's a place that they can reach out, especially for, if you're looking for a cohort of people in your domain who do this stuff.
Yeah.
Claire's hand is up and now her camera's on.
Sorry, I know I can't see everybody. Go ahead, Claire.
I think it's interesting. What about the idea of leveraging Alex's idea with Jeff's idea in the chat of carpentry? So putting together those folks like faculty members, the generous souls like Alex who are doing this stuff, kind of putting together their material, gathering together their materials or whatever they're willing to share in a carpentry style sharing environment that's kind of foundationally supported by CARC. Right? If we provide the infrastructure for it to put it all together, the kind of the repository for this stuff, using the idea of kind of the openness and sharing of carpentries, put those two together, we might be able to ferret out all of those folks who are doing this to be able to share with those smaller institutions who need that kind of help.
I like that.
And you don't have to be a paying member of Carpentries to use their curricula. You can stand up your own program.
Yeah, the HPC Carpentries group is a very interesting bunch. I've attended a couple of their meetings to try and see where the various portfolio things that I have charge of fit in, and they have a pretty interesting mission for where they want to go. Their calls are good. They have a good setup for doing their discussions and demonstrations. So I think that might be a really interesting way to entrain faculty into the use of computational systems.
And maybe more important than faculty, grad students who are future faculty, as I always say, and who have great influence in their spheres.
Is this an interest group being formed?
Well, the one thing I like about the HPC Carpentries is that it's also has division or disciplinarian curricula of you're a biologist, you want to learn how to do biology on HPC, not general computing. And I think that's one where there are some disciplines well defined and well built. Others might need some guidance, and that's one where maybe we can invite some of our faculty who are not fully represented in there to help contribute. At least even what training would you like to have to at least bootstrap some of that?
I think it's a great idea. And we got Jeff. Do you go by Jeff or Jeffrey? Jeffrey.
Pattern.
Anyway.
Usually, like when I'm writing a paper, it's Jeffrey, but
Jeffrey
Jeff,
said
yeah.
he'd be willing to help establish this. So yeah, yeah, Rich. I think it's great. I think it feels to me like that's exactly something that I need at my institution, and we could use all of this to help solve this ever-going problem that we have. And carpentry has a good name, but I don't know how to. But anyway, so it is 1 o'clock. It's 1:01 to be conscious of everybody's time. We still have more policies to go over and more things to talk about at our next time, but we'll get together with our steering committee and come back at you guys. This was really, I think, great discussion. When we do post the YouTube channel, the chat goes with it, I believe, or not to the YouTube channel. So the chat is there, but we tried to capture some things in the document too, and I'll probably go back and add more. So I think from what we talked about, let's somehow we'll keep this last thing discussed and talking about faculty and training and carpentry. And then we'll take a look maybe, and we'll have somebody present on another policy or share some of their policies. We did get a lot of links to those in the document. So if you have things that you want to find, I'm still thinking about ask.ci as a place where we put this stuff, but we need to talk to the rest of the group about that. So, all right. So I think we can turn off the recording. Is that you, Rich? And we'll see everybody next month, and happy 2022. I love the way it started so far.